This episode of My Conversation is sponsored by Dope Barbershop, an old-time barbershop experience with a modern feel.
Welcome back to My Conversation, today with Feather the Wise. And right now we have another guest in the studio. Please put your hands together and give a round of applause for Michael Bogart from Aspect Ministries. Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you.
Feather, good to see you.
Now tell us a little bit about Aspect Ministries.
Aspect Ministries I founded about 3 years ago. I was on staff of a large church here in Fresno, and before that I was pastor of a church down in Lemoore. And in the meantime, I had also done a lot of traveling in developing countries, teaching pastors and Christian leaders in Africa and Latin America, places like that. And I wanted to be able to devote myself full time to doing things like that,
Right.
along with a couple of other kind of niche things that I think are important for the 21st century. So I founded Aspect to do those kinds of things.
Aspect Ministries. Now, what are one of the niches that you specialize in?
Well, millennials. You know, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the church as a whole isn't doing that well with the millennial generation, the
Right.
18 to 35-year-olds. In 2011, there was a very reputable survey done that showed that kids who grew up in the church, and it didn't matter what church it was, just in the church, we lose about 60% of them by the time they're 18 years old. Some of them eventually sort of find their way back in after marriage or, you know, some kind of life experience.
Right.
But some of them never come back. And the church in the United States is graying pretty significantly.
Right.
Unless some things change to reach that younger millennial generation. And that's one of the things that I try to specialize in. Along with, you know, I'm not the only one doing it, but
Right.
obviously, you know, I want to be somebody that adds to the conversation when it comes to that kind of ministry.
So saying that when they're saying growing up in the church and after they turn 18 and, you know, get a taste of the life outside of the church, what do you think would be some of the things that could keep them connected?
They have to be taken seriously. I think that's one of the things that we find. They have to be heard. Their concerns, their values have to be heard. And a lot of times, you know, let's face it, churches, you tend, and as a pastor, I know you do this, you tend to preach to the values of the people that are going to be there every week. They're going to support the program. They're going to volunteer, you know, and that's good, but sometimes that group gets older and older and older, and the values that they hold are not the same as the younger people's. And so it's important, I think, for churches to not only meet the needs of the older folks or the regular crowd, but to also address the needs, the questions, the concerns of the younger generation. And not every church knows how to do that. Now, you talk about the Well. I think we brought that up before the segment.
Right.
The Well
right.
does a pretty good job with that.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But a lot of churches, they just have no idea how to do that kind of connection.
What would be some of the things you suggest as far as either events or study groups or something that can keep them connected?
Well, we did for 2.5 years. I started with my own son and some of his friends. And right here in Fresno, 2.5 years on Sunday nights, they picked the time, they picked the topics, and myself and several other more mature age men got together with those younger guys, and we talked about everything under the sun for 2.5 years. They came every single week. I mean, we kept them engaged for 2.5 years with conversations that had to do with, you know, can you trust the Bible, to, you know, what does a Christian marriage look like? How do you stay faithful to somebody for all those years? You know, all the kinds of social issues that are being discussed in the country. And so it was a great opportunity. Of course, the mothers also sent food, so that may have had something to do with it.
That helps.
But at the same time, no, it was really a good conversation, and I think churches need to do the more mentoring, kind of one-on-one or small group kind of mentoring.
Like instead of trying to reach the masses all at once, just take a few at a time that you can and let that spread within their own age group.
Because I think that age group, the one thing they miss more than anything else is the one-on-one time with adults.
Right.
It may be the thing that they didn't get growing up.
Right.
And so I think to replace that now with, you know, people that they respect, older people that they respect, older Christians who can say, look, you know, we worked our way through this. We went through some of these same questions. Jesus is relevant to life in the 21st century, and here's why. They'll come around for conversations like that. They're not necessarily going to come around for the program kinds of events.
Okay. Now, with Aspect Ministries, where do you use, is it just this whole Central Valley or?
We're based in Fresno.
Okay.
And of course we have a website and everything that we...
And what is that website?
Website is www.aspectministries.com.
We got to make sure they get the information.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Now,
indeed.
Now, before we get out, I see you have a stack of books.
Well, I've written 5 books.
You've written 5 books.
And
See, I was without that knowledge. I had
I try to write on subject. One of the things I should mention, I've taught world religion down at West Hills College. You know, it's a secular place. I've taught that ever since I was a pastor down there. For about 25 years now. So they put me in charge of, one of the ones in charge of teaching that course. And so over the course of the years, I've keyed in on certain key questions that the students tend to ask over and over again. So the first one I wrote was on Islam. What is Islam?
Okay.
And it's readable, it's very short, it's very, very accessible. Then this is my Spanish version, but I wrote a book called The 45-Minute Bible, and it's now in English and Spanish. And this really is for people who have zero Bible knowledge or very little. This puts the whole big picture together with, it's got pictures and illustrations, graphs, answers a bunch of questions. And then people always want to know about the Jehovah's Witnesses. They always want to know about the New Age movement. They always want to know about the Mormons. And so those are the books, and that's what I have to offer on my website. That and a bunch of other helpful things for Christians and churches.
Well, we definitely appreciate your ministry. And don't forget, you can check that out at www.aspectministries.com.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing wrong with spreading the word, especially if it's a good word. Well, Mr. Bogart, I appreciate you being on our show.
Pleasure.
And, now, where will you be coming up soon?
Well, actually, I'll be back on this show next week.
He's a regular. What can I say?
Yeah. So I'll see some of you folks next week.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to meet you. I appreciate having you on the show.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you very much.
Good to be here.
That is Michael Bogart with Aspect Ministries. Hey, don't go anywhere. Once again, it's My Conversation. We'll be right back after this.
This episode of My Conversation is sponsored by Don't Barbershop, an old-time barbershop experience with a modern feel. And by United Taxes and Services. With 2 locations in Fresno, give them a call today.